Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.
Republican Representative Dave Murphy of Greenville is seeking re-election in the 56th Assembly District. Representative, welcome back to WisconsinEye.
Good afternoon, Steve, and thanks to WisconsinEye for putting this on.
I have a question for incumbents. If you're re-elected, your top priority in the next session?
I have a number of them, but in my district, I have a section of Highway I-41 that is, I think, in need of upgrading. And it goes through the city, or through the Appleton and Grand Chute portion of the district, and I think that needs to be upgraded. There's a safety issue there, there's congestion issues there, and I think that's something we should do.
Is it tied up in the gridlock and the deadlock in the Capitol over how we pay for highways, Representative?
So far not.
So far not, but it could be.
It could be in the future.
Right.
Could be in the future. I've talked to the governor about it, and if you recall, probably about a month ago, the governor talked about studying the I-41 corridor between Appleton and Green Bay.
Right.
My emphasis would be on the section of I-41 as it goes through Appleton. I don't know if we're going to do that whole section of highway in one shot. I have a feeling it's going to be easier to get it done if it's broken up into bite-sized sections. And I think the bite-sized piece that's the most important is that one through Appleton.
The larger issue is breaking the impasse over how we pay for highways.
Sure.
Where are you on that? How should we finally have a long-range funding plan?
Well, and I think, Steve, I think you can break it down into two issues. There's sort of a short term, and then there's the long term. Because when you get into the long term, you're starting to look at, what is the future of automobiles, and how much electric are we going to have, and how quickly are we going to have it. So, maybe a small increase in the gas tax at this time might work okay, but it may not be sustainable over the long term. One thing I have to say, and my wife is from Minnesota, and she travels over there often, and she would come back to me and say, oh my God, the roads in Minnesota are awful. And of course I hear, we hear constantly, well, our roads are not in that great a shape. But I think that's a little overblown. Our roads could be better, but I think that somehow making it a crisis is a mistake. Because when we work on the basis of something being a crisis, I mean, that's when you start to make mistakes and do the wrong thing. So I think, I think the changes that we've made to the DOT, I think the DOT is doing a much better job. More projects are coming in at budget. Many of them now are coming in under budget. That never used to happen, Steve. And so now it is. And so now we're actually transferring money from one project to the next because we have some left over. And so I think we have to be careful. Raising taxes should always be the last alternative, not the first alternative.
I-41, of course, is a major highway, which brings up the question of tolling. Your position?
I've always said I'm open to looking at tolling and studying that more thoroughly. I know a lot of people are against tolling, and I think we need to listen to the people of Wisconsin. And this is going to be a tough one, because I've had some people come to me and say, Dave, we need to do tolling, because they're interested in getting money from the folks from Illinois and from the other states to help pay for our roads. Other people are really against tolling. They just think it's something that we've never had here in Wisconsin, and they just don't want to get it started.
New subject, the tax breaks, the tax incentive for Foxconn, and the Assembly's vote for Kimberly-Clark tax breaks, tax benefits like Foxconn. When should, in the future, Wisconsin help private companies?
Well, and this is a great question because, a couple of years ago, we had the Milwaukee Bucks Arena. I voted against the Milwaukee Bucks Arena. And I didn't feel like that was a project we were putting a lot of money to, and I didn't think it was really creating that many jobs. Then you have a situation like Foxconn where you look at it and say, I'd really rather not have to put state money into a private business like that, but this is a game changer. And so you look at all these different situations individually and saying, this could really be transformational to Wisconsin. This is the kind of thing that puts you on the map. This puts us, in the middle of the tech world. And I think for that reason, Foxconn, I support it. Now the Kimberly-Clark situation, I would really prefer to see this Kimberly-Clark legislation be something somewhat less than what Foxconn got. Mm-hmm. Because I think obviously the Kimberly-Clark is not transitional or transformational, like Foxconn is. But paper is important to the Fox Valley, and I would love to be able to hang on to those jobs. And so if we could come up with a package that was maybe some kind of a compromise, and I think that's something that the Senate would also be looking for, I think that could be the best of all worlds for us.
The budget you voted for included a big increase in state aid to K-12 public schools. When local administrators and superintendents say, we need another big increase in the next state budget, your response? Do we?
Well, all school districts are different. There are school districts that struggle, and we need to figure out a way to help them to be able to make them viable, make them quality schools. But there are lots of other school districts where they have very good facilities. The education is very good for the kids. I don't think the money is as necessary in those districts as it is in some of the other ones.
Okay. The expansion of vouchers and choice. Mm-hmm. You've seen it expanded, Milwaukee, Racine, now statewide.
Sure.
Should it expand further?
I believe in school choice. I've always said that education should not be about school systems. It should be about educating students. And when you give parents and students more choices, I think that works out better for them. And that's really, to me, that's what this is all about. It's about helping students and giving families more choices.
Levy limits. Local governments have lived with levy limits to control property taxes for 14 years.
Sure.
Some local government leaders say that hurts their ability to provide local services. Keep levy limits, loosen them, dial them back, or get rid of them?
I support levy limits.
You do?
I think that's something that the property taxpayers in Wisconsin have really gotten a benefit. And over the last 8 years, they've been able to rely on a very consistent level of property taxes. And I think that consistency is very important for our taxpayers, that they know what they're going to have to pay. Because once you start allowing for big tax increases, you can start pushing people out of their homes. And we just can't have that happen.
The debate over the Department of Corrections budget. Mm-hmm. The prisons in Waupun and Green Bay were built in the 1800s. Some Democrats have said we could cut our prison population in half over several years. Do we need a new state prison?
We can't cut our prison population in half. I thoroughly disagree with that. I think that's a bad idea. I had talked to Department of Corrections and Legislative Council about the number of inmates in Wisconsin that are violent, and it's up in the 70% range. Well, if you start cutting that in half, all of a sudden I don't know how you can get by without putting violent offenders back out on the streets. And the other thing about it is there are offenders that are in prison and you may not call them violent, but they're dangerous, and that is repeat drunk drivers. Are you going to let repeat drunk drivers that have had 10 drunk drivings back out on the streets and let them be out on the roads? They're dangerous.
I know you're hearing about from your constituents about health care. How do we preserve and maybe expand health care in rural areas, Representative?
I'm on the health committee, and there's been a lot of testimony in the last year in our committee about rural health care. And that is a really, that's going to be a serious problem going forward. If you look at the demographics of our rural areas, they're older than the cities, the average population there is. And so they're going to need health care at a higher level than other areas are, and yet they don't have it. So to me, the big thing about health care in these areas is we have to find a way to drive the cost down to keep it affordable for those people. And are we going to have to incentivize doctors and nurses in some of those areas? I think we may. I think we may have to. You can't have large sections of the state go without health care.
So in those places, state government would have a role in recruiting and retaining doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals?
I think definitely. And you look at, for instance, earlier today I was talking with UW System President Ray Cross, and we were talking about the nursing shortage, and part of his budget request being about trying to have enough infrastructure in the university system to produce the nurses that we need. That is part of deciding how the money in Wisconsin needs to be distributed. And I applaud Ray for his job in trying to bring more nursing students to the state of Wisconsin.
The pilot program between state government and Delta Dental that provides dental health care in some rural areas for the low income.
Sure.
Is that a program that should remain a priority in the next Medicaid budget?
Well, the dental health issue has sort of flown under the radar a bit and hasn't been as closely monitored as other health issues with the poor. And we find out that so many of their issues come from the fact that they have poor dental health. And we have a good clinic in the Fox Valley with the Tri-County where the dentists are supplying a lot of donating their services to help the underprivileged folks out, and I think that's extremely important. And I think the Delta Dental Plan going forward is something that we need to support.
Are you hearing from caregivers? AARP estimates that there's 578,000 caregivers in Wisconsin helping care for family members or neighbors, people they love.
Sure.
Would you support laws or regulations that call for hospitals to recognize family caregivers when their loved ones are hospitalized? Have you heard about this issue?
Yeah, I have, and I do think that it's important to, we need to try to keep people in their homes as much as we can by allowing, family caregivers, you're doing that. You're helping keep those folks in their home. We also have some other issues though. We have a situation where, for instance, with nursing homes and the assisted care facilities, where those workers are, the job shortage there is really starting to hurt them, and because so many of the residents are on Medicaid, and the reimbursement is capped, they can't compete on the other end for the employees, and so it puts those facilities really in a squeeze, and that's an issue that's going to be tough for us going forward.
The UW system budget, we've had a freeze on resident undergraduate tuition, as you know, for 6 years. The governor would like that freeze extended to a 7th and 8th year.
Sure.
Do you support the governor on that?
I do. And Steve, I think if we look at tuition at the UW, say, since 2000 until now, and took the average rate of inflation on that, it's still way above average. And I think until we need to get to a point where the average over that time period is sort of what the economy was doing. I really think that, I mean, we had one year where we had almost a 19% increase in tuition. Well, how many years of tuition freeze do you have to make up for a 19% increase? And, you know, constantly we talk about the student debt. And to me, see, that's one of my biggest areas, being chairman of colleges and universities, is to look at ideas and try to tamp down on that student debt. So then students get out, they need to be able to have, you know, reasonable loan payments that don't sort of put them in just a complete economic hole.
Do you consider, how do you respond to the Democrats' plan to allow refinancing of student debt?
Well, you know, that's kind of a misnomer, because they say, well, you can't refinance student debt. Well, the federal government doesn't allow their loans to be refinanced. It doesn't mean you can't do any refinancing. You know, so the question would be, should the federal government allow for refinancing? And I have no problem with that, but I can't do anything about that. They're going to have to solve that problem in Washington.
Last question, differences between you and your opponent on November 6th?
You know, to tell you the truth, I don't know all that much about my opponent. I'm sure she's a fine woman, and you know, and I applaud her for caring enough to run. It's difficult to put yourself out there. It's not as easy as it looks. and yeah, so I give her all the credit in the world for running, and I wish her the best of luck.
I made a mistake. One more question.
Sure.
Position on legalizing medical and recreational marijuana? Sure.
I have been much more, so to speak, liberal about the medical marijuana portion of it. The recreational marijuana, I don't support at this time. My sheriff in my county has spoken to me about it, and they are, you know, the law enforcement is very much against it. And, you know, they're the guys that are on the street every day. I'm going to take their advice. And I just think that's a common sense way to approach it.
How about medical?
The medical, you know, that's, I've had some constituents come to me and say, you know, the medical marijuana, they feel can help them. And I would like to see that. Well, the one thing I would like to see is right now at the federal level, marijuana is a Schedule I drug. I think that is not a good idea, that it should be a Schedule I drug. I think it should be downgraded, which would allow for a lot more research. And so if we're going to come up with medical treatments that revolve around marijuana, let's do the research to make sure we know what the heck we're doing.
Republican Representative Dave Murphy of Greenville is seeking re-election in the 56th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Representative, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thanks.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, AARP Wisconsin, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.